Hello, contemporary programming students. This week actually, we're going to cover chapter 8 and 9. I'm sorry, I'm behind. Chapter 8 covers collections and the collection framework, and that's what my videos this week are going to primarily cover, as chapter 9 is mainly informational. It covers strings and date formats and just formatting strings in general. I would still read through it, and there's some videos on Lynda, I believe, that I'll try to post on Blackboard. But mainly it's kind of stuff that is just good to know, so definitely read through the chapter. But we try to hit on it as the semester goes on. I try to use the date for the string formatters when I can, formatting as currency or as decimals or percents or whatever the case is. But I think collections are definitely more important for this part of your programming career. And just as knowledge is concerned, you can always look up date formatters. It's not something you really memorize. I don't have any of this stuff memorized as far as like the date formatters. So if I need, or string formatters, if I ever need one, I usually Google it or something and find it. But without further ado, I'd like to start covering primitive arrays as well as the collections framework. So primitive arrays are still useful, and they're still fast, but really they just lay the groundwork for understanding the collections framework and really diving into it and leveraging its usefulness. So again, I'm going to put some dummy buttons on this form. Let me go back here. Let me full screen out so I can drop a dummy button on here, just so I can compartmentalize some of the stuff I'm going to show you here. There's button 1 and its click event. Don't worry too much about the name of it, since I'm really never going to be using button 1 in code anywhere. Okay, so what do I mean when I say a primitive array? So there's the collections framework and namespace, which allows you to work with multiples of any type. So in one of my lectures in the past, I worked with a list, and I think I worked with a list of integer, but you can work with a list of anything. These brackets, what they mean is it's generic, so you can put anything in these brackets. So for example, I could work with a list of text boxes if I want. So a list of text box, let's just say var text box list equals new list of text box. And the compiler likes it just fine. It says, okay, you have a new list of text boxes. Then if I wanted to, I could say new text box and give it some values. I could say the name of this text box equals name or whatever. So I could have a list of text boxes, and then I could start listing out the text boxes that I want in this collection. And that's one of the built-in collections that is used. Remember, we were talking about namespaces in a previous video. If you go to the top, it's in the system collections generic. All right, so remember I said that the collections are generic, they can be of anything. So that's the collections framework that I'm going to talk about in the next video. But the primitive collections, or the primitive arrays, really lay the groundwork for how these things work at a low level. So what do I mean when I say a primitive collection? Well, these are the collections that are built in to the .NET framework. So they're lower level, they are faster, but if you're only ever iterating over, say, 10 or 15 items, it's marginally faster. It's usually not worth using the primitive arrays just because the other ones are so much nicer to work with, and I'll start talking about link expressions and being able to filter information so much easier in the collections framework and IEnumerable. So when I say primitive collections, that's usually denoted by this bracket syntax. So if I wanted to work with say multiple decimals, or let's say you're a student and you have a list of scores, that could be 7, 8, 9, 10 decimals. So how would I use that in memory? Well, I would say decimal score 1 equals 99. Decimal score 2 equals 80. Decimal score 3 equals 55, etc., etc. Or I could just put those in an array of decimals. So I could denote it with this syntax. And then I could say student scores equals new decimal, and then you have to give it how big it is. So in this case, it's a list of 3 decimals. And then from there, I could use the bracket syntax and actually start listing out the scores. I could say 99, 80, 55. And now I have 3 scores. So I could come here, I could put a breakpoint, I could start my application, and then when I click the button, the right button, I'm here, I have student scores, and it's 3. It's 99, 80, and 55. So from there, I could figure out an average, a high score, a low score. I could calculate your grade with this list of decimal. I could for each over it. So I could use this list of decimal, and I could say for each score in student scores, do something with it. So I could add it together, add it to some total, display it, whatever the case may be. So I could say total equals 0, total plus equals the score. Does not like that because it's a list of decimal. So let's force this to be a decimal. Okay. And then I could say var average equals total divided by student scores dot count. Type decimal and method group. Okay, so then this will divide the total by that, and then I could say txt result dot text equals average dot toString. Okay, so now I have these 3 scores, and I should be able to compute the average. I'm for eaching over them and adding them to my total, and then I'm saying the average equals the total divided by the count, which should be 3, and then I'm assigning that value to the average or the results text box. And there's the average 78. So these are primitive arrays. Here they are also, you can use any of the types. So you can have a string array. I'm going to use the var keyword just to make it easier. Equals new. So here I'm telling the compiler just to infer what kind of array it is, and I'm also telling it to infer how many it is because I'm using this this syntax here. So I'm saying I have this list of 3 strings, and you should be able to figure out that it's a list of 3 because here they are, and then put that into a var. So it already knows if you hover over var that it's a string array. So you can have string arrays, you can have decimal arrays, you can have arrays of any type really. Except, I don't know, can you have object arrays? Let's check it out. It looks like you can even have arrays of types. So these are all primitive. They have much less overhead than the collections framework, so it makes it a little easier, or they make them a little faster. But that's about where the upsides of the primitive arrays stop. They're pretty easy just to new up and use and put some values in them. But 9 times out of 10, I would use a collection. They offer a lot more functionality. You can add or remove items from it easier. They have methods you can use. And then we'll also find out about link in the next coming video. Another thing arrays can do is they can be 2-dimensional, so you can have an array that has rows and columns. So for example, if I wanted an array of Boolean, say, a Boolean array equals new bool, and I could say it's 3 by 3. What don't you like about that? Might not. What's it saying here? Okay, so this syntax likes the comma here. If you're going to do a 2-dimensional array, I was getting a little Java mixed up with my C#. So Java, I think you do this. C#, you just put a comma here to represent that it's a 2-dimensional array. So now you have rows and columns that you can use. So now whenever you go to try to get information from your 2-dimensional array, you can say bool array 0, 0 equals false, bool array 0, 1 equals true, etc. So two-dimensional arrays are pretty useful. They use them in a lot of games and stuff like that if you're trying to keep track of, say, a tic-tac-toe board or Connect 4 or whatever the case is. You can also have a 2-dimensional string array, like so. And then again, you can use the bracket syntax, except here, if it's going to be 2-dimensional, it has to be a bracket within a bracket. So I'm going to make a book CS 2015 rocks C# 2015, and then from there you need a comma to denote that you're moving on to your second item in your array, and again a couple more brackets. Java PRG rocks Java programming, and then a semicolon. So again, you can almost like you have a list of objects here. So your 0, 0 would be here, your 0, 1 would be here, your 1, 0 would be here, and your 1, 1 would be here. So that's how you make a 2-dimensional array. You can also have jagged arrays, which aren't It's essentially an array of arrays of different sizes. I won't go over those here because they're not really as useful, and the use cases are very, very, very sparse. Okay, so that pretty much concludes this lecture on primitive arrays and how to use them. You will have an assignment that uses a two-dimensional array, kind of like this string array here, so it is important to read up on how to access and go through two-dimensional arrays, how to access each element using for loops. You can for loop or for each loop through your primitive arrays, and etc. So if you have any questions or would like a tutorial on how to do any of that, feel free to stop by my class or shoot me an email. I can kind of send you anything you need as far as that's concerned. It's pretty simple though. To go through a two-dimensional array, you just need like a for loop within a for loop. So here's my product. So here's my for loop within a for loop. So here's my for loop within a for loop, and you must have different iterators, so I here and a j here. And then I'm using products.getLength. So this is giving me the length of a column, and this is giving me the length of a row. It's just how they code it in C#. I don't know why they do it that way. And then in order to go through each product, you can say console.writeLine. I'm just going to write this stuff to the console instead of trying to put it in a text box. I want to write product I, j dot to string. It should already be a string. It's probably going to tell me that it doesn't need that. Okay, so this is going to start at 0, 0. So it's going to write 0, 0 out to the console. And this isn't the only way to do this. So if I hit the button, I should be able to go to the console here, and you can see it's writing out C# 2015, Merox C# 2015, Java or PRG, Merox Java programming. So that's how you go through a two-dimensional array. So if you have if that doesn't make sense, shoot me an email and I'll try to explain it better. Let me go ahead and stop. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here. It's getting a little long, and then the next video I'm going to start covering the collections framework. Thanks.